A habitat is a natural place where plants, animals, or other organisms live. Each species has evolved to live and survive in their specific habitats they call home. Habitat loss is defined as the alteration of a natural habitat to the point that it is rendered unfit to support the species dependent upon it as their home territory. With that being said, the habitat would no longer be able to provide a clean and safe source of water, a sufficient amount of food, coverage from weather conditions or predators, and a safe and suitable environment to raise young. The loss of habitat is typically due to the natural causes and human activity. However, the loss of habitat caused by nature is nowhere near the amount of loss and permanence caused by human needs. There are three major kinds of habitat loss: destruction, fragmentation, and degradation. Bulldozing trees, filling wetlands, dredging rivers, and mowing fields are all forms of habitat destruction. When a bulldozer is knocking down trees, it is packing the ground while also crushing grasses. This makes regrowth difficult and gives animals little to no time to react. Another form of habitat loss is fragmentation. Some examples are putting roads through the middle of habitats. When this happens, it puts animals at unnecessary risk of getting hit by cars. Putting in dams and water diversions make migration for ocean fish difficult to impossible. And fragmentation often prevents mates from finding each other, reduces habitat size, disrupts migration routes, disrupts biodiversity, and also hunting and foraging patterns. Last but not least, there is the form of habitat loss in the form of degradation. This consists of pollution, introducing invasive species, and disrupting of the ecosystem. There are numerous causes for habitat loss. Some of the main causes include agriculture, urban sprawl, also known as urban development, water development, acid rain, and in this case it is rain that has a pH level less than 5. It is rain that contains sulfuric acid and nitric acid, and acid rain is usually caused by pollution from power plants that burn fossil fuels. Fossil fuels can travel hundreds to thousands of miles by wind, affecting vast amounts of land. Acid rain alters the pH of water sources as well as soils. The change in pH could alter the metabolic capability in plants and animals. Plants in affected soils get eaten by animals, which then creates a chain effect. This in turn has a negative outcome on the animal's population within the affected areas. Even the plants that don't get eaten by animals are negatively affected. Acid rain damages the leaves, making them more susceptible to pests and disease. Another cause for habitat loss is global warming, one that has spent a lot of time in the spotlight for polar bears losing their habitat. Mediterranean and temperate forests have lost 80% of their original cover. Due to much habitat loss over the years, much of the world's biodiversity is now found in tropical forests. However, tropical forests are currently suffering deforestation at a rate of 50 football fields a minute. Another main cause of habitat loss is caused by the introduction of invasive species. They are generally transported from one area to another by humans, and the invasive species will crowd around the native species and compete for nutrients and space. This often at times leads to habitat modification, predation on native species, introduction of pathogens, and hybridization, leading to a loss in genetic diversity. One example of an invasive species is the North American beavers in Tierra del Fuego, Argentina. In the 1940s, 50 beavers were introduced to the area in efforts to start a fur industry. Today, there are around 50,000 to 100,000 beavers currently roaming the land. The effect that they have on the land in Argentina is not benefiting it in the way that they do in America. The trees that the beavers are tearing down don't grow back like the American trees. American trees that the beavers mow down will oftentimes grow back. However, the trees currently affected by the beavers in Argentina will die when they are mowed down at the trunk. As a result, around 40 million acres of forest have been converted into meadows and streams into bogs. Overgrazing may not seem like it would have a great effect on habitat loss, but it actually affects animal health, plant health, and productivity. It can be caused by continuous or rotational grazing, having too many animals, or not by modern grazing activity. The effect that overgrazing has is reducing plant leaf areas, which reduces interception of sunlight, weakening plants and reducing root length. It also causes sod weakening. Reducing root length actually makes plants more vulnerable during the dry weather. Weakened sod allows weeds to grow, which could be potentially dangerous to the animals. There are many long-term effects as well. Overgrazing could lead to soil erosion and soil infertility, making future growth extremely difficult. The extent of the causes vary around the world. In America, most habitat loss is due to pollution, urban expansion, and agriculture. However, in countries like Brazil, Madagascar, and Indonesia, a large amount of habitat loss is caused by clear-cutting and slash-and-burn agriculture. In Europe, over 85% of all natural habitat has been destroyed solely for agricultural purposes. Habitat loss is identified by the IUCN as the main threat to 85% of all the species listed as threatened or endangered on their red list. It leads to the potential extinction of all species, which has a long-term effect on biodiversity, reduces sustainable yields in fisheries and forests, loss of pollinators, reduces water quality and carbon storage, and loss of genetic material that could provide medicinal value. Some animals that are affected by habitat loss in the U.S. include, but is nowhere limited to, the Florida panther. The panthers actually used to roam throughout the southeastern U.S., but are now surviving in a small area in the south of Florida. The area is only about 5% of its former range, and they are listed as endangered in 1967, and as of 2011, there are only 100 to 120 left in the wild. In addition to the panthers, loggerhead turtles, sandplain gerardias, large metal marks, Mississippi gopher frogs, White River spine dances, polar bears, and the San Joaquin kit foxes are all experiencing habitat loss within the U.S. In other areas around the world, mountain gorillas are suffering from charcoal production, Sumatra elephants and pandas are suffering from deforestation, orangutans from palm oil plantations, and entire coral reefs are experiencing loss of habitat. Now, there are multiple steps that we can take as a race to help prevent habitat loss. We can start by identifying the problem areas, learn more about the natural habitats in our areas, and help educate others about the importance. We can help reduce pollution that can damage wildlife and habitats. We can preserve existing wetland and salt marsh vegetations, plant native vegetation around your home and property. We can help prevent the spread of invasive species in natural habitats, and we can encourage the protection of key habitats through legislation. And now that we know some more about habitat loss, we can go forward and help prevent it.